Well, hello everyone and welcome to my April book roundup. I'm going to share with you short reviews and ratings for the 7 books that I read this month. Now 7 is kind of a lower total for me, but I picked up this behemoth of a book on the 20th and I haven't finished it yet. I will talk about that at the very end of the video when I give you 5 things on my TBR for May. Additionally, I read a wide variety of genres, so because of that, I will put in the description below some timestamps, so if you want to skip over a genre or skip to a certain genre, feel free to do that. I'll also give you a timestamp for my book of the month and the TBR at the very end. So let's go ahead and just jump right in. The first book I want to talk about is something I read on my Kindle, and it's a thriller entitled One Way by Jeff Lane. So I don't read thrillers quite as often as I used to. I've become kind of a character first type of reader, and a thriller by definition is a plot-based method of storytelling. So because of that, I just don't pick them up as much. However, I do like to pick up a thriller here and there just to, cleanse the palate, a little change of pace. I think one of the reasons that I'm able to read over 100 books a year is that I'm able to jump in and out of genres, and I don't get too much repetition or any monotony in my reading because of that. So I picked up One Way by Jeff Lane, and this is a really good thriller. The premise is pretty cool. A guy is driving home from work and he stops at the gas station and his wife appears, but it's his wife from 4 years in the future who's come to prevent his murder that night. And it's very fast-paced from the very first chapter all the way to the end. If I had one complaint, it was just one of character. I felt that the different point of views in the story kind of had the same narrative voice in my mind. But besides that, this was a fantastic book that would make a really good movie, actually. I really enjoyed One Way by Jeff Lane. I'll read more by him. I gave One Way 4 out of 5 stars. All right, next is a work of nonfiction. And this is Longitude, the story of a lone genius who solved the greatest scientific problem of his time by Dava Sobel. And this one surprised me how much I enjoyed it. First of all, I do like nonfiction I call it narrative nonfiction. Sobel calls it popular history rather than academic history because it's written in a more compelling nature. That's not just laying out the facts, but it has a narrative, there's a villain in the story, and it's just very, very well told. But at the heart of this is something that I enjoy. Now, you may have or have not noticed in past videos, my watches. I'm a watch enthusiast and watch collector, have been for about 5-6 years. So, wristwatch check. Today I'm wearing the Seagull with the Panda dial. Anyway, I'm not TGV and this is not a watch channel, but in my love of collecting watches, I've gotten interested in horology, the study of time. It started with watches and trying to understand, how mechanical movements work and things like that. But at the heart of Longitude is horology, as that is one way to possibly be able to calculate longitude is to simply build a really great clock that you take on the ship with you. So this was absolutely an intriguing story for me. I really enjoyed it. I gave Longitude by Dava Sobel 4.5 out of 5. All right, next up, my favorite genre is the fantasy genre. Let's start with Baptism of Fire by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the 3rd novel in the Witcher series and the 5th book of the Witcher series, which started with 2 very good short story collections. Now, I will say that this is the best novel I've read in the Witcher saga so far. But frankly, the bar is quite low. I really don't feel that the novels are his strength as an author. I feel that all of them are pretty poorly plotted, fuzzy world building, and that might be putting it nicely, and inconsistent characterization. When he takes the time to flesh out the secondary characters, like in this one, 2 characters, Regis and Milva, he fleshed them out and they were very compelling, very interesting, but he doesn't do that very often. So most of the secondary characters are just very two-dimensional, and these books as a whole just are kind of middling in my opinion as far as modern fantasy is concerned. Now, I asked myself the question, with this one, do I want to continue reading the Witcher series, or am I going to just delete those 3 rows from my TBR? I am going to finish the series, just not anytime soon. I'm not really compelled to finish the series anytime soon. Maybe next year, maybe the year after, maybe 10 years from now, who knows. But Baptism of Fire is the best of the Witcher novels, but even so, it's only a 3 out of 5 for me. Now, on to some fantasy that I really did enjoy this month. This is the omnibus edition of The Books of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. I love this illustrated omnibus edition. I read the first 3 books in March. If you want to hear me talk about that, you can go check out my March book roundup. So I read the last 3 books of this volume in April. So I enjoyed the last 3 books a lot more than the first 3. But frankly, part of that is me. It took me a while to get used to Le Guin's writing style, which is quite dense. For me, it meant that I really had to slow down my reading pace. So by the time I got to the 4th book, I was really used to Le Guin. It was the first time in the saga that I didn't have to reread anything. Previous 3 books, I had occasionally had to reread a paragraph or even a chapter in one of the books because I felt that I didn't catch everything. But when I read Tehanu, book 4 in this series, I was finally used to Le Guin's writing style, and I really enjoyed it. I liked that she brought back one of my favorite characters from Tombs of Atuan, fleshed her out a little bit more, and then there was a new character that was introduced in there that was really riveting. I really liked Tehanu. I gave it a 4 out of 5. The 5th book is The Tales from Earthsea, and The Tales from Earthsea is 5 interconnected short stories, and I'm surprised to say that it was my favorite of all 6. And the reason I enjoyed it most is I felt that it provided a sense of world building that I don't think was in the previous installments. Because these 5 stories encompass thousands of years, the first 2 were set well before the series starts, 2 happen kind of in the middle, and then the last one leads into the 6th book. Because of that, 5 different stories, different time periods, different places. You got a lot about the world, you got a lot about the magic, you just understood things a whole lot better, at least I did. So I really enjoyed Tales from Earthsea. I gave that one a 4.5 out of 5. The last book is called The Other Wind, and frankly, it was a little bit of a letdown after Tales of Earthsea. I loved that Le Guin brought back all the characters from the previous 5 installments and put them into the same book. And it was nice to see all these characters on the same page with one another again, because the story does jump around a bit. And I do understand and appreciate thematically where she was going with this, but I just felt the story was just kind of, good, not great. So I gave The Other Wind 3.5 out of 5. But as a whole, I would say that this book series is a solid 4 out of 5. I don't regret any of the time I spent in this world. And now that I know that I just simply have to slow down when I read Le Guin, I will revisit these books in the future to see if my thoughts change on them. But I really did enjoy my time in Earthsea. All right, on to my book of the month. This is a work of science fiction, and it was Shadow of the Hedgeman by Orson Scott Card. This is the 2nd book in the Ender's Shadow series, which follows Bean, which is a friend of Ender in the original Ender's Game novel. This was a fine work of political and military science fiction, which normally would turn me off, but because it's so well done, I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you want to see a full review of me talking about this, I'll put a timestamp up, I'll put a link up there so that you can check that out, as I did a full dedicated review of this book and my reread of all of these Orson Scott Card Ender's Saga books. But this was my book of the month, Shadow of the Hedgeman by Orson Scott Card. I gave 4.5 out of 5. All right, on to my TBR for the month. Starting with that behemoth that I mentioned. The behemoth of a book that I picked up is this almost 1,200 page 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. You can see I still have some work to do, but I'll finish this in the next 2 or 3 days, most likely. This is considered Murakami's magnum opus. Murakami, frankly, is hard to classify, but it's magical realism. 1Q84 is a riff on George Orwell's 1984, but it's not what it seems. But it's utterly compelling and mesmerizing, and I'm really enjoying it. It's taken a while to get through, as long as it is, and I've enjoyed it, even though it slowed down my number of books that I read last month. Also on tap for May is Shadow Puppets by Orson Scott Card. This is the 3rd book in the Ender's Shadow series, and I'll do a full dedicated review of this one the last week of May. I'll also be reading some Tolkien this month. These 2 installments from the Great Tales box set Children of Huron and Baron and Luthien. I've already read The Fall of Gondolin, so I'll be reading both of these next month. And then one by Stephen King, the novella with Richard Chismar entitled Gwendy's Button Box. So those are 5 of the things that I will be reading in May. I would love to hear if you've read any of those, what you thought. Let me know in the comments below, or any of the ones that I read in April. I'd love to hear your take on any of those books, if you agree or disagree with my ratings. If you want to see that and more, you can follow me on Twitter and Goodreads. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.